Hey everybody, today I'm going to talk about trichothecenes. They are the most toxic mycotoxin that's out there, and I have personally suffered from the experiences of being exposed to mycotoxins like trichothecenes. My daughter has as well. I know what it feels like, so I'm going to go over that in this video. I'll talk about it in great detail. First, let me say I'm not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice. It's based on my personal experiences for informational and educational purposes only. So if you had a mycotoxin test recently and you saw that you have high levels of trichothecenes, you may say to yourself, man, what are trichothecenes? Is that something that's bad? Well, they're actually the most toxic of all the mycotoxins that are out there. And if you have high trichothecene levels or you're sensitive to trichothecenes in your antibody test, that means that you have a significant problem at hand. If you have a chronic illness, you have an autoimmune disease, you have some type of chronic health issue, it could be caused by exposure to these trichothecenes. Trichothecenes impair liver function, phase 2 detoxification, breakdown of protein, and normal immune function, etc. So trichothecenes are really the worst. There's ochratoxins, there's plenty of other mycotoxins, but the worst of all are trichothecenes. In fact, they were used as a biological weapon in warfare, and it's because of how disabling they can be. And they are far more likely than you think. Nearly half of the houses out in the United States have mycotoxin issues. And black mold is one of the most common ones because it's due to water damage, and when water damage is common in almost all the buildings out there. So if you have a sensitivity that develops to these mycotoxins, specifically to trichothecenes, then you have a high probability of being set off in various buildings because almost all the buildings are going to have some levels of trichothecenes in them, and you may be reactive to them. My daughter was a perfect example of this, where she was reacting to all these different mycotoxins, but trichothecenes were showing up in her urine. And whenever we would go anywhere that had a history of water damage, she would have severe flare-ups. Her eyes would cross. She'd even have seizures in certain situations. Eczema flare-ups, etc. But the reality is, if you see trichothecenes, you hear about trichothecenes on a urine test, on a mycotoxin antibody test, then you absolutely have to go ahead and consider getting out of that house or remediating immediately and retesting. So how do you test your home to see if you have trichothecenes in your home? You get something called the EMMA test. It's the EMMA test, and it tests mycotoxin levels for your home, and that'll tell you if you have trichothecene levels that are elevated inside your home. And this is a much better test than just simply getting a air sample test, and it'll actually test the mycotoxin levels in your home. The other test that is the only other mold test indoors that I mentioned in the past is the ERMI test, the ERMI test. It'll tell you if you do have black mold or molds that produce trichothecenes, but it will not show you if you have trichothecenes on its own. It'll just show you the molds that produce the trichothecenes. So if you have exposure to trichothecenes in your past, you also have to realize this could cause semi-permanent damage. It could be several months of recovery, or it could be years. It just depends on the level of exposure, but it is possible. Your body can heal from anything. And you need to just get yourself out of exposure and start to have a low protein diet and have a diet that's high in fiber and start detoxing your body, and you can get over it once and for all. But it is no joke. Trichothecenes are the most potent of all the mycotoxins. So if you see them on your urine test, then go ahead and make some changes. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I know a lot about mold detox. My website's endsickness.org. I got hundreds of articles, hundreds of videos there teaching you how to heal yourself. So thanks for watching.